By 2010, the Hispanic origin population may become the second largest race group. By 2050, 1 in every 3 births will be Hispanic. And welcome back to Talkback Live. We just got this fax a moment ago. Mindy in Texas says the USA became a great nation because the immigrants who came to this country learned English. No longer do the Latins feel compelled. I hope that's not true.
May I?
Yeah. Let me first get a comment here from a gentleman who's with the Mexican consulate here in Atlanta.
Yes, well, I speak more of my own experience here in Atlanta. I have 2 years here. My wife is French. They are learning French, English, and Spanish, and they are speaking the 3 languages. So I think that children can learn bilingual or multilingual if necessary. The problem, I think the question to raise is what quality of bilingual education and what resources you have for bilingual education.
Alice, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to respond to that. Our parents are desperate to have their children learn English. The parents at our center, after asking their local school for over a year to teach them English, and the school refused, finally pulled their children out of school and for 2 weeks kept them at the center. And this is not an easy thing for recent immigrants to do. It was a very, very difficult boycott. They were, by government mandate, put in programs that only taught them to read and write English from kindergarten through 5th grade, and unfortunately, the perception is that those families do not want to assimilate and do not want to learn English. Our families are desperate to learn English. They live in Spanish-speaking homes. The parents say they can teach the children Spanish. If the school is absolutely refusing, as is the case in Los Angeles, to teach the children to read and write English, then there is no way that child is going to learn it.
Parents have a choice to pull their kids out of a program whenever they choose.
Excuse me, they obviously don't.
Well, you know what we're talking about here is taking anecdotal situations and turning it to your own advantage. That's not what we're talking about when we look at the education of children in the state of California and across this country.
Jaime, I don't think anybody in this audience or anywhere else disagrees that English needs to be learned in the schools. No question about it.
Nor do I, and I'm sure neither does
And all of the people that are pro-bilingual believe the same thing.
Absolutely.
I think what they don't want is or what I'm hearing here today, that's the sum and substance of Ron's initiative, is you're like throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
Well, let's look at the reality of the situation. Bilingual education has been tried in California for 30 years, and it's failed miserably.
Well, I guess the question is being raised, then let's fix the system that isn't working.
That's what we're doing.
There's no evidence.
Well, no, you're getting
Ron,
rid
let me
of the
ask,
system.
why has bilingual education failed according to you?
Because the theory doesn't work in practice. Look,
now, is it because, according to you, it's not teaching English? Because you know what? The kids that were pulled out of the 9th Street School, Alice's school, are children who, 74 of which were pulled out. Only 3 of those kids are now being tested as proficient in English. Isn't that the case?
That is false.
The case. That is the case.
Excuse me, can I say something?
So where is the advantage of your program?
Excuse me, can I say something? Let's talk about the reality of the current system. One reason so few children learn English is the schools right now in California are paid more money so long as children do not learn English. If a child learns English, the schools... Excuse me. If the child learns English, the schools lose funding, and that's the reason that they don't teach English to the children, or, in some cases, pretend that the children have not learned English even after they have. Now, look at all the different immigrant groups in California. There are children who enter the public schools speaking 140 different languages, but the only group of children that are given large quantities of native language, so-called bilingual instruction, are Latino Spanish-speaking children.
Oh, that's absolutely false. There are bilingual programs in every language out there.
There aren't.
Because they're in the communities, and the communities ask for the programs.
You are wrong.
No, you're lying.
No, let me finish. Let me finish.
Well, you know what, Ron, we have to take a break.
Okay.
I'm so sorry. And I will say this as we go into the break. I'm horrified to think that this would be a political issue when it is the welfare of the student that's at the core of this issue. But we'll talk about more about that in a minute. Well, we got a raging debate here in the audience. So in the time that we have left, let's just take a quick poll. Chris, start with Paula.
Yes, hi. I've been bilingual since I was 5 years old, and this was in Mexico. I just moved here 8 months ago, and I'm wondering, in this country where there's so much money for research, why don't you take a look to other countries that have successful bilingual programs and try to apply that? Because in Mexico, there's a lot of children that in 6 months, 1 year, they're speaking English. And they're bilingual by 4, 5 years old. And in my house, no one spoke English. In my country, everything's done in Spanish, and I was bilingual. So
Good
I think we should take a look.
Good question, Paula.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it'll have to be rhetorical so we can get a few more opinions in here. Mary Lou?
I think it's really important that we focus on developing good bilingual programs. What the anecdotes people have talked about have been about bad bilingual education in which two languages are not acquired. I think there's evidence that from research about educational programs that there are really good ways to do bilingual education, and that's what we need to focus on. One of the most frightening things about the Unz initiative is that it can be brought to California with a 51% majority, but it will take 66% to get rid of it. So that for the foreseeable future, a questionable educational policy will be mandated. Nobody will be able to choose anymore.
Okay, Dan from California.
Yes, I just think it's unfair that we're asking the majority of people in California to make a decision on something that's going to only affect the minority.
Okay, and last but not least over here, Sandy and her husband Terry.
Well, we live in Florida, and for the time that I worked after I retired, I went to work for somebody. We would go down at Flagler and North Miami Avenue, which is the center of the city of Miami. And all we heard was Spanish. There's hardly anybody speaking English. And the problem I see there is that the people that hire people to work all speak Spanish, and that probably goes on in the offices also. So there's something lost someplace.
Okay, we've got to let that be the last word. I'm so sorry. And to our guests, thanks so much for participating, and we'll discuss this again, I'm sure. Thank you for joining us. I'm Bobbie Battista. Enjoy your weekend. Miles O'Brien will be back on Monday. See you then.